Hello and welcome back to your weekly Premier Injuries podcast, where we discuss all things to do with injuries in the Premier League. We'll give the insights to player injuries with knowledge on return times and cut through all that misinformation. You know, you could even call it fake news. That's my Donald Trump impression there. Terrible. Ben just in stitches. Plus, we will talk tactics and data of players who have gone out injured or are returning to their teams to give context of their return. This will be at the same time every Tuesday through the season. So if you have any inquiries, you can comment below or tweet any of us, and we will try and include those discussions in our shows. Also, before we get into the analysis, please remember to like the video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel. You're getting a leg up in terms of the fantasy community here. This is the best, most up-to-date injury information that you can get hold of. But as always, a welcome back, Raj. Pleasure to chat to you as always. How have you been, Raj?
Not too bad. You know, tremendous watching Arsenal Brentford this past weekend. Yeah, had a great time.
I mean, we'll probably get on to Arsenal a little bit, maybe in terms of our heartbreak causing injuries to ourselves because it is so terrible. But Ben, you know, your team didn't have the best of weekends, but how have you been?
Football's back, isn't it?
Yeah.
So look, our level of expectation is it's down like here. Yours is up there. We know we're garbage. We know that we're going to just scrape outside of that relegation zone, and we live to fight another season. Whereas Arsenal,
we haven't realised we're garbage yet.
Well, yeah, that's not for me to say. I might get shot down in flames here. But look, I enjoyed it. It was good to see football back. It was good to see supporters in the ground. I really enjoyed Friday night's game against us. And I really enjoyed Newcastle's games as well. Like I say, unfortunately, the result didn't go our way, but we've got a couple of goals, and we move on. Onwards and upwards.
I did want to ask both of you maybe your favourite match or goal of the weekend, Raj. Which was the one that really kind of captured your imagination?
I wouldn't say there's one goal. For me, it was more performance by Antonio Mikel. I mean, I thought he played incredibly well. And so that to me was probably my favorite kind of general aspect of the weekend, was seeing how well he played. And we also know part of his injury history with the hamstring. So I want to see how he holds up.
And Ben, whose performance did you enjoy, player or team?
I mean, always satisfying when your own thoughts mesh with FPL. And I went with Bruno. The United performance I thought was great, and in particular, I loved Bruno's third. Just that strike, so clean, so crisp. You had that debate: was he onside? Was he not? Last season, that wouldn't maybe have went away of the attacker, but this season, it did. It fell in favour, and also, I've heard it. I'm already sick of the saying, but referees applying that soft touch with VAR, maybe, seeing what happened and worked so well during the Euros, allowing the games to flow. It's, as a spectacle, it's just a lot more entertaining, and it's a lot more enjoyable to watch. So that was a pleasure.
And I would say that my highlight was probably the West Ham Newcastle match. I think that was the most entertaining. You just didn't know what was going to happen. So a pleasure to them. You've mentioned Manchester United, but we're going to go to the blue half of Manchester to start the show, though, with our discussion points. And I think the big one coming out of the weekend was, would you say fairly big injury news with Gundogan? Ben, what is the information now on what looked like a fairly nasty shoulder injury?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, because it happened so late in the game, that sent tongues wagging, the rumour mill into overdrive. It didn't look great. It never does, when TV replays slow things down. But it wasn't massive. The early news to come out of City and Pep was, his usual flippant self. I've spoke to the doctor, but it'll be assessed, and and so on and so forth. We've learned to take what he says now with a pinch of salt. Very rarely does he give anything that is very even close to the truth when it comes to player availability and injuries, certainly as we approach game day. But the early sort of rumours or suggestions from the City camp was that it wasn't serious, but that Gundogan could potentially be available for game week 2.
And Raj, why is this injury maybe not as bad as people thought it was, like with the mechanism and things, or was it just managed very well?
No, I mean, to me, it looked like we call it AC joint sprain. The question was severity of it. And so based on the fact they said it's not serious right away, you think it's a grade 1, and then they didn't rule him out for the week. So that almost confirms that it's a grade 1. You can play through these with the painkiller. Typically, the question becomes, will they risk him in a game week 2 versus Norwich, right? So that's really the question. I think physically he probably will be able to go, but do they err on the side of caution or not?
And just for the listeners here, what is the difference between like a grade 1 and kind of what level can it go up to in severity?
Yeah, grade 1's mild, like just stretching of the ligaments. Grade 2, typically looking at 25 to 75% tear, and grade 3 is typically a full, complete rupture of those ligaments.
So it's an interesting insight there, and I guess obviously 1 and 3 have much bigger return to times. I mean, just kind of an example, do you know of a grade 3 tear, and what kind of time frame would that be?
So grade 3 tear will really depend on the full extent. Typically, it's not going to be isolated to only that joint. You're going to have to see how much damage is going on, and typically it's going to require surgery. So, I mean, that in this case, you're looking at 3+ months. So, again, less than a week to over 3 months, based on. And again, this is just me, of course, trying to guessing what the injury was. So, there's a massive, even depending on what the specific shoulder injury is, the range is going to change based on that as well.
So it'll be interesting to see if Gundogan does come back tactically in the team. And I'm going to throw this to both of you in a second as well. KDB is obviously on the horizon here, but Manchester City have signed Grealish, who's kind of playing the role that Gundogan did play last season. So I'm thinking in terms of Fantasy Premier League, it puts me a little bit off Gundogan. Just this season, I think he might be playing that deeper role once again if he's used. I think looking at Grealish's price tag, he's going to be the one that's kind of picked more often. And we've seen kind of historically since 2016 when Gundogan arrived that he's been more sporadic in the team. He's played important roles. He's been really good when he has played, but he hasn't been that kind of confirmed starter like you turned to maybe with David Silva years ago, De Bruyne now, and I think Grealish is almost the heir apparent to Silva. Raj, what do you think Gundogan's role is going to be this season?
No, I agree with you. I think he's going to be used more in spot roles and when Pep sees him as tactically beneficial. Like last week, I know with Grealish, I think he had the most carries into the box of any player for the week, or I know at least for City. And so you're going to see that emphasis on using him, and then more so, and then tilting away from Gundogan.
And Ben, would you describe maybe Gundogan's season last year is probably anomalous, in terms of his goal scoring, in terms of his positioning on the pitch? Was it because of the fact, Aguero was injured for so long, Jesus didn't really come into the frame enough? Do you think that maybe is why he had such a fantastic fantasy output, and we probably won't see that again?
Yeah, it was almost a perfect storm. Obviously, it was a loss of Kevin De Bruyne, which was the big moment which saw Gundogan step up. There were concerns, whether City could carry that momentum without De Bruyne, and we know his influence in the team. But Gundogan moved forward and he took that mantle, and he really, grabbed City by the scruff of the neck and got them to games. And I think his outputs surpassed anything that he had done previously, certainly for City. But when you look at those offensive players within that City squad, it's difficult to see where any of the players fit. Maybe with the exception of Kevin De Bruyne when he's fully fit. It's going to be a case of trying to shoehorn in as as many of those stars as you can. The City second 11 is probably good enough to be a top 6 side in the Premier League, and therefore Pep has the flexibility to be able to rotate and chop and change at will without really weakening his team, and that will only get worse as the season goes on, particularly around European competition.
Now, we've talked a little bit about Kevin De Bruyne there in terms of his importance for the team, but I was a little bit incredulous at the weekend that he was risked in that Spurs game. We know now that he had 0 sessions in terms of coming out of those Euros because of his injury. Ben, is that exceptionally rare? I mean, is this kind of an unprecedented situation?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily rare. What we're talking about is a high-profile, high-status player. So you look at Kevin De Bruyne's position within that club, and he's imperative. And therefore, if there's any kind of inclination that Kevin De Bruyne is capable of maybe having some minutes on the pitch, then Pep's going to involve him in that match day squad. It came out of absolutely nowhere, by the way, and this goes back to again with Guardiola. And I have absolutely no axe to grind with managers who are maybe a little bit liberal with the truth, a little bit of gamesmanship and smoke and mirrors. What really, really gets my goat is managers who just come out and plain lie, who lie to the back teeth. And with De Bruyne, only 7 days earlier, Guardiola came out and said he was a long-term absentee. He wouldn't be back, and it was highly likely that it would be, post sort of international break, game week 4 onwards. What we do know, Kevin De Bruyne went to see Dr. Rahman Kugat, and it's not like this injury had just evolved over a 24, 48, 72-hour period. There had been communications with the Belgium national team, their medical department. It was several weeks when he came back to City, so they had a full understanding of where De Bruyne was in that recovery process. And look, yeah, I think it was a bit of a calculated gamble and a bit of a risk based on the fact that City were lacking numbers due to those number of late returners from international duty. And I think ideally Pep would have just preferred to have Kevin on the bench, not used him, and hopefully took 3 points from that game. But as we've seen on Sunday, things don't always pan out as you would like. They were struggling, and it's almost like a last roll of the dice there to try and sort of salvage at least a point against Tottenham.
I mean, Raj, a phrase that you used last week was risk versus reward. I don't know as much as you and Ben in these situations there, but to me that seemed a massive risk for somebody that is so important for the Man City team all season. Or does Pep, well, I guess Pep knows a lot better than what I do, but I mean, how do you think of it from your perspective?
So my guess is probably after that evaluation with Dr. Ramon Cugat is that risk level probably came down based on whatever he said. That's my guess, and that's what probably put him into that acceptable risk category rather than it tilting completely toward risk. That's just my guess. And so based on that calculation and him coming on and the game situation, they decided it might be okay for him to come on in that situation. And I think back to what Ben's point about a player who is a high profile, high status player, they do tend to have a little bit more leeway as well. I mean, in the Euros, he was allowed to play. He didn't miss a game. And so we've seen that with De Bruyne is the fact that he's given a little bit more benefit of the doubt when it comes to managing his own issues. For better or for worse, we're going to see.
So is this more like the fortitude of Kevin De Bruyne rather than the desperation of Pep, would you say, Raj?
I think it's a combination of both. I think the medical and training staff, obviously they have their assessments, but then they also I think De Bruyne also understands and kind of has a higher level of understanding of his own injuries and how he feels. So they're working together on that in a collaborative manner. And there are some players who like Rashford is another example of that who's given a lot of clout when it comes to his own decision making.
Now, I want to turn our attention to potentially some fake news busting. A lot of people this week have been talking about Andrew Robertson, that he's making an imminent return. He might be there for game week 2. Ben, what's the latest update on that situation? And also, Raj, you can chip in and maybe explain why people are being, a bit, premature with their Andrew Robertson situation.
Yeah, first of all, we start with the facts as we know them, and Liverpool generally, per se, tend to provide, fairly decent updates with regards to their players' injuries, recovery process, and where they are at the stage. And ideally, I think Jurgen Klopp has said Andy Robertson may be targeting a return in game week 3, but that could be held back to game week 4. So that's the premise that we're working on. Now, what always seems to skew things and what people love to see are social media updates. And what we had is Andy Robertson with a still picture of him on the training pitches. We seemingly thinking training individually and, potentially doing some low intensity, running. Certainly not drills, nothing to give it any context whatsoever. But of course, the big news and why this is big news within the community, one, Andy Robertson, he's a big player for Liverpool. You've got that twin fullback wing attack with Trent, but also it potentially impacts massively on Tsimikas. The 4, I think he's went up now, so he may be 4.1 million rated defender who a lot of FPL managers opted to bring in, and they're thinking his luck gone against them. Is it just that one game week payoff that they're going to get? But look, we take these images with a pinch of salt, and it doesn't matter how, I think ultimately what people tend to forget is you cannot, even though technology advances and treatments change physiologically, there are still timelines and time frames in place where the body can't surpass that in such a short period of time.
And Raj, so do you think that game week 3 is the more realistic one? Would you say that anybody who's saying it's quicker than that is, talking cobblers?
Yes. He's straight line running, tells us that, he has ankle stability, good range of motion, but it means nothing when it comes to a lateral ankle injury, which is stressed the most during rotation, during lateral movement, during spontaneous movement. So it's a good sign. Does it mean he's ahead of schedule? Maybe, maybe not. We don't even know how he responded to that session, right? Because they're going to check how he felt afterwards and then potentially progress him further. So all we saw, like Ben said, was one still frame, which is a very small part of the overall picture. To me, he's still on track for game week 3 or 4, and that can evolve quickly as well as you get close to it. So I'd pay more attention to other indicators as we get closer to game week 3 compared to, him, a social media post of him running in a straight line doesn't tell us that much.
Now, I want to turn the attention to one of Arsenal's players here. We talked about Partey last week, but I think Arsenal may be equally missing this player as well. It's Gabriel, the centre-back, left-sided centre-back. Ben, what's the latest on him, his return? Because it was tendinitis that was keeping him out, wasn't it?
Yeah, so he returned to Arsenal pre-season training and he quickly moved to join Brazil ahead of their tournament at the Olympics. And he complained of discomfort and pain in the knee there. And it's something that has been worked on over the summer. Now, the latest update suggests that he should be back on the training pitches and training normally and fully with the squad in and around early September. But what we do know with this type of injury, it's not a definite science with that. There are instances where it can easily flare up. It's a condition that may need to be managed, over a period of time. Can he play on it? Yes, potentially. But again, we see with maybe similar overuse injuries in the past with maybe like Jordan Henderson or Jonny Evans, for example, the plantar fasciitis currently, it's one of those types of conditions and issues that is monitored on a daily basis. And really, like I say, it's those individual sort of one-on-one sessions where it's evaluated, that decisions are really made ahead of the game week.
Raj, why is this tendinitis so hard to kind of pin down then? Why isn't it an exact science?
It's very, tendons are interesting creatures. And like Ben said, they can be very sensitive. So you can do something one day that doesn't flare it up, and the next day it might flare it up. And so it's very day-to-day assessment based. And so that's why it's very, very hard to put a definite timeline on that. It's all about increasing intensity, seeing how the player responds, and then going from there. And that's why they haven't even given a timeline for him. Whereas with, let's say, Partey, they gave the 3-week return to training, right? That tells you the difference between, say, a ligament injury, which has more established time frame, versus a tendon issue, which tends to have more variance. Now, that being said, the team did handle Odegaard's patellar tendinopathy long-term last on his loan quite well. So they do have some experience handling these injuries.
And Raj, last season, he only played 23 league games. Do you think that this could have been something that's plagued him for a little bit of a while? Or was it other reasons why he was in and out of the squad?
I would think so. The reason I think yes is because he also had what they didn't really say any more detail, but kind of generalized knee joint swelling. And so there's something certainly going on within there that might be long-standing. I know he was strapped up a few times, if I remember correctly, around the knees last season. So it sounds like something that he might have just been dealing with at a low level, and then it really flared up on him during the Olympics, and therefore now they're kind of just deal with it in a more just proactive manner.
And going forward, does it worry you a little bit that he's missed, a lot of pre-season? He's not been able to kind of get that base level of fitness, and he's had problems last season. Tendinitis is kind of, as you've described there, a problem that is more about management. Is he going to have problems this season kind of keeping up fitness, playing every game week once he's back?
I mean, it's never a good sign when you miss preseason ramping up. It always puts you at risk. It always puts a dent on your fitness. He also had, if I remember, he had COVID last season as well, and some reporting that he was relatively symptomatic, which impacted his fitness as well. So you add all those things, and you have a player who does have multiple risk factors now.
And looking back at his history, Ben, is there anything else to kind of give concerns about him being an injury-prone player, or is this almost a unique set of circumstances that has appeared post his signing to Arsenal?
Yeah, look, I mean, let's not forget, he's coming into a brand new league. And how many times do we talk about the Premier League as a different level? It's a completely different beast in terms of, the intensity, and we go back, it's about, in terms of distance covered, very little has changed over maybe the last 5, 6, 7 years. Players cover in and around 12 kilometers. But when you look at the number of high intensity sprints that these players are now required to run, and the distance, that's the major difference, and the game is becoming faster. And for that reason, players coming need that time to adapt. They need that time. It's a different environment, different training schedules, and nutrition, diet, climate, and it all comes together. So I think, with he being a relatively young player as well, hopefully it's just him adjusting to that. I think fortunately, although, people may question the strength and depth maybe within an Arsenal squad, but there are options currently, within that centre-back position. You've got Rob Holding, Callum Chambers can drop in there, Pablo Mari, you've now got Ben White, and also Gabriel. So there's no need to be throwing sort of Gabriel in there, week in and week out. You would assume that Ben White is going to be the mainstay of that central partnership, and then, players paired in and around him. So it could be a case of Arsenal sort of managing Gabriel, and again, maybe looking to increase that intensity with a view to hopefully having a player that's able to tolerate the demands week in and week out, maybe for 2022, 2023.
I mean, I think it's quite sad as an Arsenal fan that Gabriel has had these problems, because I think Ben White and him, looking at their data, they would complement each other so much. Gabriel is much better in the air and kind of with those aerial duels. Ben White is more of the kind of out there, able to press, but also both of them are so good with passing the ball. I mean, just one last question for you, Raj. Does that excite you potentially, maybe not this season, but going forward, that Arsenal do have a fairly good core there with Tierney, Ben White, and with Gabriel at the back there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, I mean, those are three players of a back four who all offer unique attributes, and they all fit pretty well together. And they're all young players who can grow together with each other and with the team as well. And that's what Arsenal would look to be doing. Martin Odegaard signing, same thing, right? Young player with potential, high awareness, who can grow within the team and grow with what the manager wants them to do. One last thing on the injury. You mentioned his aerial duels. So this injury is actually often called jumper's knee because it's from the massive demand from jumping. Gabriel is a massive leaper. So you have to make sure the knee can withstand the demands that he places on them.
That is a really fascinating insight, actually. So jumper's knee there from Gabriel. Let's move it, though, to somebody else that I wanted to bring up. And this is Arthur Masuaku, Ben. Do we know what is going to happen with him? Because last time I checked, it was fluid on the knee, which was causing him problems. I mean, what does that come from? What is the actual injury there? And when can we expect him to be back?
I mean, the problem is you never really know. You don't know what's happening in the joint to actually cause that reaction, that level of inflammation. So it's about, getting to the root cause, dealing with that problem, and then gradually, going through that rehabilitation process, going through the recovery and making sure that there's no reaction. You need to have the player at a point where, he's able to, again, tolerate the demands of training without any irritation, without any reaction before he's able to step up those. Now, Masuaku has had ongoing knee problems now for a long time. And I think maybe towards the end of last season, just before he went out, that was maybe exacerbated by the fact that, David Moyes maybe overused him on occasion. And again, that caused some kind of reactions. What we do know, we did expect him back for pre-season, but it's very similar to the situation where it can be evaluated on a daily basis. You can go through a session, a set routine on one day without any problems, and then a similar session, days later, and you have that level of swelling and inflammation. But we do know that Masuaku has played some minutes for the under-23s during the close season. But again, there's been very little since. So that indicates, although we haven't had any official update from the club, that sort of suggests that there may be, another problem underlying there. If they can't manage that, then maybe, something needs to be done to maybe address that underlying cause.
And just throwing it to you, Raj, is this kind of getting to a situation with Masuaku a vicious circle? Because I look at players like Antonio as well. He seems to almost have stabilised just a little bit, but at the same time, he seems to be suffering from many years of not getting a pre-season, being overplayed, overworked. Is this the problem with Masuaku as well? What kind of point do you get that maybe he is fit, he is ready, but maybe to give him extra time and not put any pressure on actually a return date?
Yeah, I mean, I think, though, to Ben's point, if that was the case, you would have seen him play more consistently after that point. I think the fact that his minutes went way down after that speaks to the fact that he likely had a negative reaction to that. And I think, the overplaying aspect, the comparison you made with Mikel Antonio is a good one in terms of the overuse. But the difference there is with him, he had muscular injuries, which were tough to deal with, but what's going on. When it comes to vague knee soreness, there can be a multitude of factors that might be underlying it, right? It could be overuse, it could be cartilage chipping off, it could be a bunch of things. It could be, wear patterns on the knee from, previous injury. And so that vague knee soreness, whenever I hear that, it's always a yellow flag until you can address it. And even then, it's hard to say, is it a biomechanical issue with him, right? There's so many underlying factors it could be.
And I think the interesting thing for West Ham is he is quite a key player. When he has played in the team, the side have conceded slightly less XG. So with him in the side, 1.1 XG per 90. Without him, 1.3 XG per 90. But then the attack was slightly worse off with him in the side because they play like a 5 at the back. So I think Cresswell owners will be interested kind of monitoring that situation, maybe hoping that Masuaku doesn't come back soon, because Cresswell does seem to almost play a little bit better when he is out on that left flank, which Masuaku holds up in. Let's move it to another team that plays in a similar colour to West Ham, though. We're going to move it on to the villains. We're looking at Ollie Watkins. Ben, what is this injury?
In short, impact injury, knee, patella bruising. Picked it up in Villa's last pre-season game. Removed as a precautionary measure ahead of game week 1. Dean Smith talked about the possibility of Ollie Watkins maybe being involved if he could come through that final training session pain-free. As we know, he was omitted from that matchday squad, and that indicates that he wasn't 100%, but he has been training this week. So again, it's about that pain management. And as it stands, I fully expect Ollie Watkins to be in the squad against Newcastle. And I'm going for a 4-4-2 with Villa, with Ings and Ollie Watkins up front. And I'm going for a 3-3 draw.
But I think it is going to be a high-scoring affair. I think it's going to be one of the games of the weekend. I think you and I will cover that in another podcast, though, Ben. Just throwing it to you, though, Raj. What is the difference between an impact injury and another type of injury? I mean, from the description now, I might be wrong, but it doesn't seem as serious as other ones.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the impact, right? In this case, it sounds like it's just bruising to the kneecap, and so it becomes a pain tolerance issue. They didn't want to risk him in week 1. It was probably just too painful to go through. It was probably changing the way he was moving, his gait patterns or his movement, or he's having too much discomfort. So, in week 1, you don't want to risk him. And so this sounded like a, mild to moderate impact injury. With severe impact injuries, we've seen plenty of them more and more recently, especially with some rash challenges in preseason, nonetheless. You can have some severe injuries from that. So it all just comes down to the extent of the impact. But the big difference between a non-impact and an impact, non-impact injury usually speaks to some underlying cause that will trigger it, which makes it harder to figure out, versus an impact injury, the cause.
So just one final question on Ollie Watkins, Raj. He has had a proper pre-season, hasn't he, Ben? So do you think that this kind of week out isn't too much of a worry, and he's going to be absolutely fine for the season ahead?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, with this injury, I'm guessing he was still doing some of his fitness aspects. You miss 1 week, you've been ramping up the entire time. Sure, it's not ideal, but it shouldn't impact him all that much.
So I want to bring it on to the final discussion point of this week. And you've mentioned it already, actually, Ben. It's Jonny Evans with his plantar fasciitis. I hope I've said that correct. It's a bit of a mouthful. Now, I think that there is an interesting situation developing there at Leicester. They've got Evans out. They've got Fofana out. They've had to bring in Vestergaard as an emergency situation. The team look so much better with Evans in the side. I think last season there was a defensive collapse of the unit as well. There's also a problem there, I think, of not really a settled team at the moment. It seems like they're playing whoever's fit rather than who is best for them. When is Evans likely to be back? Because I think he is almost the key to that team playing really well, especially out from the back.
Yeah, hopefully. And again, you're not able to give any kind of definitive time frame on this type of problem. Indeed, towards the end of last season, Brendan Rodgers was continually saying Evans could be back for the next game week. And we've seen him break down in the FA Cup final and leave the stadium crutches. But if it carries on the same kind of trajectory, he should be training with the squad during the international break, and it's a possibility that he may make game week 4.
And Raj, what makes plantar fasciitis so hard to kind of control? Well, what is this type of injury?
Well, essentially, it's tissue on the bottom of your foot, and it's stressed during every single step you take. And so that's what makes it really hard to control, because there's force going through it on every single step. And therefore, it can accumulate like over time. And now we've seen with him, it's almost become a chronic issue that's been plaguing him. And so it's very, very touch and go with him. Even if he does come back, the question becomes, will he be able to stay in the lineup for an extended amount of time? That's even more important now with Fofana out.
So it seems like time will tell with the Jonny Evans situation. I just find it quite interesting as well with Vestergaard coming into the team. I'll throw to both of you on your opinions on this transfer. But actually, I think it's actually quite a good one for them. One of the problems last season with Southampton was defending set pieces. One of the problems for Leicester last season was defending set piece situations. They conceded 13 times for them, which I think was the joint fourth worst in the Premier League last season. Almost up there with Leeds. So actually, in an essence, Fofana and Jonny Evans getting injured, forcing the hand of the club there, was actually a good thing for them. Also, just throwing it out there, top 2% data for under pressure passes. So he looks quite good there for Leicester. Going forward, am I being too critical of the Foxes, Raj? Because I think that they do have quite a few problems. Or will Vestergaard solve quite a few of them in actually a surprise kind of way?
Yeah, I think he helps solve some of their problems. And I think I am impressed with the transfer, considering Southampton knew that they were under the barrel and they still got him at a relatively decent value. I mean, if you harken back to Arsenal with Mustafi for 30 million, in a similar situation, like this is a much better deal than that. And he actually addresses some problems for them. But I think, to your point, like you were saying, it seems like to an extent that they might not be optimizing their personnel. They're trying to just putting players on the pitch and seeing what happens. I'm interested to see what happens with Madison's hip, because we know he had another knock on it. I believe it's the same side as the surgically repaired one that he had issues with last season. So that's always going to be an interesting factor with them.
And throwing it to you as well, Ben. Vestergaard, good signing, but are Leicester actually going to break the top four? Are they going to fall, into fifth and beyond once again this season?
I mean, the Vestergaard situation, I thought he'd been a great signing for Arsenal. I thought him alongside Ben White. I think you've missed the Tony Adams and Martin Keown, Winterburn, Lee Dixon, somebody that you've seen with the Brentford second goal, just somebody who's willing to put their body on the line. And nobody in that Arsenal backline, fit or not, so include Gabriel, I just don't think they're capable of being able to bring that to the team. So, at that price, I think rumour to be in the region of maybe 15, possibly rising to 20 million. In today's market, that's not a bad piece of business. And that's probably indicative as well of Leicester's recruitment in terms of one, there was already talk about bringing in another centre-back before the Fofana injury. We know that he's going to be missing until 2022. Again, no definitive timeline. And that's probably looking at Jonny Evans, 33 years of age, and with this managing this foot condition. So it's, Soyuncu and then potentially one other. We know that Amati can sit in there. But look, I do like Leicester. You've got Timothy Castagna, who's training with the squad. He can come back in on the left-hand side. You've also got cover there now, not only with Thomas, but you've got Ryan Bertrand. He missed out last weekend, COVID-related absence. You've got Pereira, who can go, on either flank. So there's a lot of cover there. Regarding the Madison, he also took a knock on the back, the lower back impact. Now, Roger said he was moving freely, but he just wasn't fluid enough within that. They weren't moving the ball enough as quickly as he would like. And I was just wondering, do you think the arrival of Odegaard almost puts an end to any speculation about James Madison firstly moving to the Emirates, because for me, and that's and I'm not going to say no disrespect, because the minute you say no disrespect, you mean you are disrespected. For me, I think Leicester at this point in time, in terms of his football and his progression, I think it would be a wrong move for Madison to potentially, go to London. And I think he will thrive and certainly flourish with Leicester this season. And I'm expecting a big year from them.
Go on, Raj. You give your opinions on James Madison.
I think with Madison, it was always going to be a matter of him wanting to move to Arsenal, not rather than if Leicester wanted him to go, because we've seen how dynamic they can be with him. And then even, the price they were asking for at 60, possibly 70, that might just be a price that's too good to pass up if you are the Foxes. So I think in this case with Odegaard coming in, it pretty much does kind of, make that null and void. And I think it's going to work out honestly best for both teams and both players.
Yeah, I would actually agree with Raj on this situation. I think that Odegaard for me is probably, I don't know, better suited for Arsenal as well. With the price point, 30 million, the rumoured transfer fee, an absolute steal in this kind of situation. I don't know if it's because Real Madrid are kind of looking to get people off the books, but at that price point, it just makes so much sense. He can grow with Arsenal and a group of players. And as much as I like Madison, I think he is a little bit overhyped sometimes. He does a lot of good creativity, but people kind of go, oh, isn't he amazing at shooting as well? And, Raj and I discussed this off air, that he takes a lot of low quality XG shots, which do end up in the back of the net. He does seem to find them, but it's not kind of a long-term sustainable output. And I just think that Odegaard fits in well with what we need at Arsenal. So I would be happy if, because we're getting Odegaard for 30 million, that we spend 30 million maybe on another midfielder and somewhere else in the squad, obviously a right back as well. It stretches the funds a little bit more. So yeah, I think this is, Raj has nicely kind of summarised it. It's probably the best move for both clubs. And actually, we're both victors out of this situation. But I think what I can say is the community are a victor from listening to this podcast. As I say, this is the injury podcast. Every game week, we're going to be here every week of the season. Thursdays, you can look forward to this coming out. Make sure to get your questions in. Make sure to subscribe, and also make sure to check out Raj over at 3CB Performance. If you haven't yet, what are you doing with your lives? He does incredible output. His videos, his tweets, he just keeps you in the loop with all that essential information. And also make sure to like, share this video and subscribe to our channel, because we've got great content here on Premier Injuries too. But Raj, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Can I give one shout out? Phil Jones, after 19 months hiatus after his knee surgery, he's now potentially back on with the squad, which is incredible. It is just, whether it happens or not, just the resilience to go back and fight through that and come back and potentially play again. That to me is incredible.
He's become a bit of a meme, hasn't he? But
yeah,
people kind of detracting there from the human side of the story. I really like that shout out, Ben. And I'm sure you'd back that as well, Ben, in terms of Phil Jones.
Look, great for him to be involved. I know Manchester United had a behind closed doors game against Burnley on Tuesday. I'm not sure if Phil Jones was a part of that squad. I know Ollie used as an opportunity for Tom Heaton to get some minutes. Jadon Sancho was involved. Unfortunately, Rafael Varane wasn't. I mean, the future of Phil Jones probably, certainly in the short term, lies away from the club. I think, for his development and just for, getting him back into the swing of that competitive environment, the likelihood is he may be asked to go out on loan. You've got Eric Bailly, you've got Lindelof, you've got Maguire, you've obviously got Varane there now. Wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle tried to pick him up, in all honesty. You know what, that would not surprise me. But I think, like I say, there'll certainly be minutes involved with the under-23s and a potentially a loan move in the offing.
And this is the excellent insight that we get every week. So I'm going to say goodbye from me. I'm going to throw it over to Ben for one final word before we sign out.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Raj. Absolutely fantastic. Just echo those thoughts and those sentiments. That is the Premier Injuries Fantasy Podcast with obviously your host, Jason and Raj from 3CB Performance. Make sure you check it out. He's all over YouTube. He's all over Twitter. And it's not just football and it's not just injury. The guy knows his stuff and he will be doing a lot more with Premier Injuries, as we all will be in the very near future. So until the next time, it's a bye from me.